Hello friends, welcome back to my YouTube channel Journey with Vijay Kumar Shrivastav. Today we are going to study the topic methods of soil conservation. First, to understand what is soil conservation. Soil conservation is the protection of soil from erosion and other types of deterioration so as to maintain soil fertility and productivity. Soil conservation is the prevention or reduction of soil erosion and soil depletion by protective measures against water and wind damage. In other way, soil conservation is a set of farming techniques and practices to avoid soil degradation, soil erosion and depletion in particular. Soil conservation methods target long-term use with a thought of the future. Soil conservation is the prevention of soil loss from erosion or reduced fertility caused by overuses, acidification, salinization or other chemical soil contamination. Now to go through why soil conservation is important and what are the benefits. Humankind in general and farmers in particular benefit from numerous advantages of soil conservation. This agricultural practice contributes to sustainability in a number of ways. Like first one is improving soil quality and productivity. Good soil conservation helps to put nutrients back into the soil. It is playing an important role in boosting earth quality and productivity. It is maintaining the natural environment for earth-dwelling organisms, which increases fertility and reduces the necessity of chemical fertilizers, thus boosting yields and saving cost at the same time. Second is soil conservation is playing an important role in mitigating erosion or reducing erosion. There are many types of conservation practices that prevent damage to the soil and can even help farms become part of a thriving ecosystem. Soil conservation methods to reduce erosion and depletion help agriculturists to avoid the expansion of new lands when territories become infertile. Third one is soil conservation treats soil as a living ecosystem. Inhabitants of that ecosystem all have roles in keeping the soil fertile and healthy by breaking down organic matter, releasing nutrients, and helping create good air and water circulation within the soil. This happens with good soil conservation techniques. Fourth one, soil conservation plays an important role in increasing water infiltration and its storage. The soil conservation techniques of minimum tillage versus conventional plowing affect soil moisture by reducing cracking and evaporation as well as raising the infiltration rate. Next is improved air and water quality. The importance of soil conservation relates to water supplies and the earth is a natural filter to purify water. Soil conservation mitigates the concentration of pollutants and sediments. In its turn, water is the basic condition to dissolve nutrients for plants. Soil carbon sequestration and reduced chemical applications contributes to air purity also. Next, soil conservation also playing an important role in providing food and shelter for wildlife. Land with growing vegetation is a living environment for animals. It is not only the source for nourishment but their homes as well. Now here we will go through various methods of soil conservation about which we will study in details. The methods includes like contour bunding, terracing, strip cropping or buffer strips, fallowing, cover cropping and mulching, crop rotation, intercropping, no tillage, conservation tillage and minimum tillage, control of gully erosion and use of grassed waterways, windbreaks, crop diversification, afforestation and reforestation, checking overgrazing, salinity management, keyline design for runoff water, watershed management and constructing dams. So these are the methods about which we will study in details regarding soil conservation. Contour bunding. Contour bunding is the construction of small bunds across the slopes of the land on a contour. This practice of farming across the slopes takes into account the slope gradient and the elevation of soil across the slope. Contour bunding is the method of tilling sloped land in order to conserve rainwater, and with the help of furrows, crop rows, and wheel tracks across the slopes. This method helps in slowing the water runoff and prevents the soil from being washed away along the slope and minimize the erosion. Row crops and small grain crops like corn, beans, or wheat are often planted in contour pattern so that the plants can absorb much of the rain and erosion is minimized. Terracing or terrace farming. A terrace is a piece of sloped plain that has been cut into a series of successively receding flat surfaces or platforms which resemble steps for the purposes of more effective farming. This type of landscaping is therefore called terracing or terrace farming. This is one of the very good method of soil conservation. In terrace farming, making or forming sloping land into a number of levels flats which resemble a series of steps. Means there are number of step of flat surfaces. Decreasing the slope by making it resemble steps which are commonly found on the side of a mountain or hill to retain the soil and to slow down the flow of rainwater down the slope. Terracing is widely popular in monsoon, popular in Eastern Asia for wet paddy cultivation, is the excess water and silt can be retained at each terrace to form flooded paddy fields. Terraces are also used in temperate and semi-arid regions where slopes are steep. And the crops which are grown under terracing are rice, cotton, sugarcane, wheat and potatoes. Strip cropping. What is strip cropping? Growing soil conserving and soil depleting crops in alternate strips running perpendicular to the slope of the land or to the direction of prevailing winds for the purpose of reducing erosion is called strip cropping. In strip cropping, crops may be cultivated in alternate strips parallel to one another. Some strips may be allowed to lie fallow while others are sown to different kinds of crops like grains, legumes or small tree crops. The various crops ripen at different times of the year and harvested at different intervals. This ensures that at no time will the entire area be left bare or exposed. The tall growing crops act as windbreaks and the strips which are often parallel to the contours help to increase water absorption by the soil by slowing down runoff. Now growing buffer strips. These are one of the methods of soil conservation where the trees and bushes on the banks of water bodies are grown to prevent sediments, water wash-offs. Their root fix the soil to avoid slumping and erosion. Canopies protect from excessive sunlight to water inhabitants, and falling leaves are a source of organic matter and food of minor aquatic animals. Fallowing. What is fallowing? Keeping the land vacant without raising any crop is called fallowing. There are two types of fallowing. First one is barren fallow, where without plowing and undisturbed land is kept fallow. And second is plowed fallow, where the land is prepared and living without growing any crop. Sometimes it is important to allow much used land to reset or lie fallow so that the natural forces can act on the soil. The decayed natural vegetative matter helps to increase the plant nutrients in the soil. Fallowing also increases the subsoil moisture and improves the general structure of the soil. Winter fallow is commonly practiced in temperate regions after the harvest, but cultivation is resumed in the spring after the snow and frost have weathered the topsoil. Long periods of fallow cannot be allowed, however, in intensively run farms as farmers cannot afford it. Cover cropping. A cover crop is a crop of a specific plant that is grown primarily for the benefit of the soil rather than the crop yield. Cover crops are commonly used to suppress weeds, manage soil erosion, help building and improving soil fertility and quality, control diseases and pests, and promote biodiversity. Cover crops are close growing crops that provide soil protection, seeding protection, and soil improvement between periods of normal crop production. Use of mixed cover crops including grasses and legumes increases the biomass return to the soil, enhancing activity of the soil organisms and improving soil productivity. Mulching. Mulching means covering the soil surface by straw, leaves, or grasses or by inorganic matter. Mulches of different kinds check soil erosion, increase soil fertility, and also minimize moisture evaporation from the topsoils. So it is also playing important role in soil conservation. Next method of soil conservation is crop rotation. What is crop rotation? It means growing a set of dissimilar crops in a regular succession on a piece of land in a specific period of time with an object to get maximum profit with least investment without impairing soil fertility, like growing crops sorghum gram, groundnut, wheat, etc. Crop rotation may also be defined as the repetitive cultivation of an ordered succession of crops on the same land, and one cycle may take 1 or more years to complete. It is not advisable to grow the same crop in the same field for more than 2 years in succession, as the crop will tend to exhaust one particular kind of mineral nutrient. Thus, it is best to alternate crops in the fields, like growing legumes as beans, clover, vetch, and many other plants which add nutrients to the soil by converting free nitrogen into the air into nitrogenous nodules on their roots. By rotating different crops in successive years, soil fertility can be naturally maintained and there will be protection of soil erosion. Intercropping. Intercropping is the one of the method of soil conservation where the different nature of crops are grown, which are adding the nutrients to the soil, covering the crops, giving the protection covering to the soil, and minimizing the soil erosion and playing important role in soil conservation. Intercropping refers to simultaneous production of 2 or more dissimilar crops in a definite row ratio pattern or row arrangement on the same piece of land at the same time. The base crop necessarily in distinct row arrangement and its recommended optimum plant population is suitably combined with the additional plant density of the associated crop. The objective is the intensification of cropping both in time and space dimensions and to raise productivity per unit area by increasing the pressure of plant population. Intercropping has better utilization of growth resources than sole cropping by combining legumes and non-legumes crops. Legume crops are adding nutrients, nitrogen fixation to the soil, covering the soil and protecting from soil erosion and having important role in soil conservation. Next method is tillage, which combines of minimum tillage, zero tillage, stubble mulch tillage, and conservation tillage. These are tillage methods something soil conservation professionals recommend. Tilling farmland after each crop disturbs the soil and reduces the ability of the soil to hold water. In minimum tillage, no tillage, stubble mulch tillage, conservation tillage, farming means the soil is left alone and the remainder of the last crop decomposes into the soil. These tillage methods allows dead plants to decompose and provide energy to the soil. Soil has organisms living in it that needs dead plant and animal matter for food and energy, and no tillage farming helps replenish the soil regularly. This type of tillage fields retain many beneficial organisms like earthworms and others that helps feeding the soil. The field is also less likely to evaporate water, helping it retain water better, and these are less expensive and more efficient methods. Now first we will go through minimum tillage, which is aimed at reducing tillage to the minimum necessary for ensuring a good seedbed, rapid germination, and a satisfactory stand and favorable growing conditions. Second is zero tillage, which is also known as no tillage. This is an extreme form of minimum tillage. Primarily tillage is completely avoided and secondary tillage is restricted to seedbed preparation in the row zone only. This tillage is resorted to places where soils are subjected to wind and water erosion. Timing of tillage operations is too difficult and requirement of energy and labor for tillage are also too high. A stubble mulch tillage, where the soil is protected at all times either by growing a crop or by leaving the crop residue on the surface during fallow period. Sweeps or blades are generally used to cut the soil up to 12 to 15 centimeter depth in the first operation after harvest, and the depth of cut is reduced during subsequent operations. When unusually large amount of residue are present, a disc type implement is used for the first operation to incorporate some of the residue into the soil. So in this case, the crop of residue is cut into the pieces and they are incorporated to the soil. Next is conservation tillage. This is done to conserve soil and water by reducing their losses. It is a system of tillage in which organic residue are not inverted into the soil such that they remain on surface as protective cover against erosion and evaporation losses of soil moisture. Next method is control of gully erosion. What is gully erosion? Removal of soil by running water with the formation of channels that cannot be smoothed out completely by cultivation is called gully erosion. Gully control by the diversion of runoff provided to be an economical measures. The best method of controlling existing gullies is to re-establish vegetation. So for the control, we have to divert the runoff of the flow and go for revegetation. Grassed waterways means the furrow for water streams covered with grass, means water is flowing on covered grass surface, not on soil. It is connected to a ditch, pit or current to collect water, and the grass roots keep the earth in place, protecting it from water erosion and thus contributing to soil conservation. So in this method, the water flow is mainly on grassed land, not directly to the soil surface, by which there is control over soil erosion and we are going for conservation practices. Now windbreaks. What are windbreaks? Windbreaks are such structures which break the wind flow and reduce wind speed. A row of trees and shrubs planted across the wind direction is the most effective. The windbreak reduces the wind speed on the leeward side at 200 meter away up to 20%. Leeward side means the flow of wind after crossing the trees. Windbreaks comprise one or more rows of trees and shrubs of different heights placed perpendicular to the prevailing wind direction to protect fields, homes, canals, or other areas from wind and blowing soil or sand and protect soil from erosion. In case of windbreaks, the principal method of reducing surface velocity of wind upon which would depend on abrasive and transportation capacity are vegetal measures. In case of windbreaks, we are playing important role to reduce the wind velocity, surface velocity, by adopting the various crops which are having the capacity to break the speed. Crop diversification. This practice is often like crop rotation in that it helps to maintain soil fertility, where annually harvested crops are grown and they can be alternated in the field where perennial crops like tree crops are grown. However, the chief importance of crop diversification is the economic base creation for the farmers. In particular, crop diversification reduces the danger of depending on a single crop like growing monoculture. And there is the need of crop diversification because of sustainable income generation, maintaining ecological balance, employment generation, and reducing the risk of crop failure. And crop diversification depends on various factors like resource availability, household requirement, technology assistance, procurement prices of the commodities, and institutional support and availability of the infrastructure. Crop diversification benefits can be defined as it playing important role in controlling soil erosion, maintaining crop productivity, increasing soil organic matter by incorporation of different crops. It reduces the wind erosion, decreases soil evaporation, sustains crop production, promotes microbial processes like growing earthworm population and microbial activities in the soil, and improves the soil physical conditions. Now, afforestation and reforestation. The two terms that are quite often mistaken for each other are actually quite different from each other. However, both of them are equally helpful for the purpose of soil conservation. Both of them prevent soil erosion and thus are pretty essential as they will check waterlogging, flooding, soil erosion, and increase productivity of land. Now we will go differentiation between afforestation and reforestation. Afforestation is the process of planting trees or sowing seeds in a barren land devoid of any trees to create a forest. Afforestation is the establishment of a forest or a stand of trees in an area where there was no previous tree cover. Many government and non-government organizations directly engage in program of afforestation to create forest. Wherever reforestation refers to growing the forest again over the lands where they were existing and was destroyed due to fire, overgrazing, and excessive cutting, etc. Next method of soil conservation is checking overgrazing. Overgrazing of forest and grasslands by animals, especially by goats and sheep, should be properly checked. Separate grazing grounds should be earmarked and fodder crops should be grown in large quantities. Animals freely move about in the fields for grazing and spoil the soil by their hoofs, which leads to soil erosion. This should be avoided. So, we have to check the overgrazing of the lands and alternate facilities to be provided for grazing, fodder and forage crops. By this, we can minimize the soil erosion and it will play important role in soil conservation. Next method is salinity management. The salinity of soil that is caused by the excessive accumulation of salts like sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium and chlorine, which have a negative impact on the metabolism of the crops in soil. Salinity of soil is detrimental to the vegetative life in the soil, and the death of vegetation is bound to cause soil erosion. Hence, salinity management is one of the indirect methods to conserve soil. In saline soils, reclamation method consists mainly in removing excess salts, which can be done in different means, like scraping the salt from the surface. Second, flushing soil and leaching salt away with excess irrigation, where the purpose is washing them down into the lower layer beyond the root zone, preferably completely out of the soil. Third method is growing salt-tolerant crops. And fourth, use of humic acid, which may prevent excess salination, especially given excessive irrigation. Humic acids can fix both anions and cations and eliminate them from root zones. By the providing excess irrigation, there is leaching requirement. The leaching requirement may be defined as the fraction of the irrigation water that must be leached through the root zone to control the soil salinity at any specified level. Next is Keyline Design method. The keyline refers to topographic features linked to water flow, which will control the soil erosion. Keyline design allows the water runoff to run directly into an existing water channel and prevent soil erosion caused by the water. Constructing dams. Much of the soil erosion by river floods can be avoided by constructing dams across the rivers. This will check the speed of water and saves the soil from erosion. Next method of soil conservation is watershed management. Watershed is defined as a geohydrological unit draining into a common point by a system of drains. All lands on earth are part of one watershed or other. Watershed is thus the land and water area which contributes runoff to a common point. A watershed is an area of land and water bounded by a drainage divide within which the surface runoff collects and flows out of the watershed through a single outlet into a larger river or lake. So this video presentation was all about methods of soil conservation. Hope this will be useful to all of you. Thank you very much. I have given here my YouTube channel details, Journey with Vijay Kumar Shrivastav. Having request, please visit the channel, subscribe it and provide your kind and valuable feedback. Thank you.